Well, here we are. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. We are here and we're going to be talking about the Windfall Elimination Provision and a proposed law that will eliminate it. Joining me today is the great John Richardson. Unfortunately, Keith couldn't make it today. We'll miss him. But John is here today. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Very good. You ready? You excited to be talking about Social Security and the Windfall Elimination Program?
Oh, well, none of this applies to me, so it's a bit of a learning curve, but it's interesting, and I think that the advocacy attempts to get relief on this for Americans abroad are relevant. I think important lessons, perhaps, for getting CBT changed as well. So,
Okay, and
there's
that's going to be the angle we talk about it. But now I went to and I just this is not Social Security is not something I ever expect to get. So I just always tune it out myself. So whatever it is, like, well, I don't really think it's going to be around. So I'm kind of independent. Independent of what happens to it. I guess I'm liberated from that. But one of the things that did happen was that that it's proposed. The people, the proponents of the bill that this bill will eliminate the windfall elimination for a lot of public employees who are getting hit by it. But you're saying it's not just public employees in the United States, but this also has been affecting a lot of U.S. Americans overseas as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a couple of things here for context. This is actually probably about the only time that this podcast will be relevant. Is that on November the 12th, the House passed H.R. 82, which essentially ended what we're going to talk about, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. But we're going to talk just about the windfall elimination provision today. Basically, the Senate's got to get their act together and pass this by December 31st, or it's not going to happen. And I think this is hugely significant because this at the moment, the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, all these friends of Americans abroad, right? And, I think that if they don't do this, this should reasonably be understood by yet one more betrayal of Americans abroad by the Democratic Party.
So it doesn't have it, and it is a bipartisan bill. It has gotten votes from both sides. So
it has, but the procedure is controlled by the Democrats, Senator Schumer.
Okay.
Anyway, leaving aside the policy,
here it is. Hey,
well, I want to actually begin today. I don't, most of what I know about this really comes from Helen Burgraff, who ran American Expat Finance. So I want to begin with a shout out to her today, both for her cartoons and for some of her research, which frankly has provided the mechanism for me to think about this stuff a little bit because she, got some links to her stuff here, but her work is showing what the problem is for Americans abroad, which is really a twofold thing. Okay, the first is, and we'll talk about why, their Social Security benefits, for many of them, are reduced by the windfall elimination provision. But the second thing is they don't know about it until they're ready to get their benefits, right?
Oh, so, come on.
No kidding. So all these years.
You know what? That does sound like the government I know. That does, though.
It does, doesn't it? It's just American, right? So this is an issue on both what I would call a substantive level, should they, have their benefits clawed back, but absolutely on the procedural level. At the very least, people ought to know about this many years in advance, and they don't. But so we've got a couple nice cartoons from Helen. Okay, you can see basically Homeland American Steve. I don't know where she gets these names, but notice he seems to get a lot, and Expat American Mike gets a lot less. And I think probably, we begin by talking about what this damn thing is and why they get less, right? What is the windfall elimination provision? So
I would just say our two most years ago, I'm laughing because years ago we did an analysis of the most common first name of someone who was our client, and Steve and Mike were the two winners. So I am laughing. That is actually
Did she ask you for the right names, Anthony? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know somehow she got it right. So way to go, Helen. Right on. Thank you so much for what you're doing. So now we're going to be talking.
so
We're going to be talking about how this applies to Americans overseas. But I do want to let everyone know, if you're not an American overseas, to still hang on, because this still can impact you greatly. And really, and I would say, to me, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the impetus behind this movement isn't necessarily the American overseas, but rather it seems to be more the public employee unions.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, basically, it affects, a significant number of people in the United States who probably, would be our better audience, actually, if they were listening today. But I mean, basically, it affects people who have had work in their career that's not called covered employment. In other words, where, there's been no Social Security contributions by employers. And, the reasons for this, I don't want to get into this too much, but when this whole Social Security thing started historically, right, there was a constitutional question as to whether the federal government could tax state employment, right, et cetera. So anyway, that's part of the reason. But, if we just start here, we've talked about Social Security before. I think it's important for people to understand this, that it's funded by a tax on employees and a tax on employers, right?
Right.
And it's the lack of payment of tax on the part of the employer that causes the reduction here, right?
Oh,
Got it?
okay.
Funded
So because I'm looking, I'm looking at various arguments back and forth, and some are saying, hey, look, this is a bad thing because these are people who haven't paid into Social Security. But what you're saying is like, no, they have. It's just there hasn't been that matching employer.
Well, no, they have. Well, they haven't, but it's large. The way it's defined, okay, is largely based on, it's not covered employment, so there are no contributions. But the way it's usually discussed is in terms of the employer. Okay. So bottom line, if the employer is not paying into it, you've got a problem here. Okay. And that's the basis for the reduction that we'll talk about. And I think it's important for people to understand that, because with these sort of public policy decisions, it's very hard to be objective. People always see it through the lens of how it affects their own life. And,
exactly. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, procedurally, this is a total mess up. People should know about this, right? But I'm not entirely sure that this is unjust. But we'll talk about that as we go through it. In any case, this is the basis of the problem, right? It's employment where there hasn't been contributions to Social Security, right? Now, so we've got a whole bunch of people in the United States, state employees, this sort of stuff. But, for the group that I'm always talking about, Americans abroad, oh my God, you go somewhere and you're employed somewhere and you've got a pension, I mean, these are people who are clearly impacted by this. But anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, and I'm, by the way, and I would say this at this point, I'm not sure. At the end of this, I hope to know whether I'm for this or against this. But that's kind of an interesting thing, because as an employer myself, I learned. I learned what employment taxes were on the other end. I was like, wait a second, what's this about? Wait, I have to pay basically a sales tax on my employees' wages? That's what it is, an employer. And so really, for a lot of employees, you don't know this, but your employer is paying more than what you're getting paid. There's hidden taxes we have to pay. And really, we're paying it, but it's hidden, and that's what the government likes to do. It likes to hide the taxes. That way you're not aware of them. So let's figure out whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing, or what it is. And I want to get and I hope to get to everyone's comments at the end. We always get a lot of comments, so let's get into this. Great, thank you for joining us. Jason's ready to go. Yeah, we're ready to go too, Jason. So please ask away your questions. We continue on. Okay. Next slide. Oh, this is where we're going to find it, right? This is where we're going to find it, right?
We'll get there. Let's keep going. Okay, but that's.
And I would just say this, and because the one thing that I just crack up with this too, when I see the Federal Insurance Contribution Acts, because when you get your paycheck, you get your first paycheck, and I was discussing this with my nephew Jake. He was like, "What's FICA?" And I'm like, your paycheck doesn't even tell you what it is. That the government won't even tell you what FICA is. Well, that's your Social Security, Medicare. That's what I'm saying. That's what it is, but it doesn't tell you that. So kind of interesting off the bat that a 16-year-old kid, they won't even tell you what's on, where your money's going to. They kind of hide it. So
yeah. So I received an email out of the blue a couple months ago, wanting see if I could help them with this. And this is an excerpt from the email, right? So they said that they just received this is from somebody in Australia who was getting Social Security, I think. Anyway, they just received a question: have you retired and started receiving a Social Security benefit from another country or a private pension based on earning not covered by Social Security, right? So, I mean, that tells you exactly what's going on. We parse the language here. Are you getting a Social Security benefit? Okay. Are you getting a benefit from a private pension plan based on earnings not covered by Social Security, right? So, I mean, let's pause for a minute. I mean, depending on how you view this, maybe that's not unreasonable. I don't know, but let's continue here. In other words, this is real. Okay. This is a message I got from somebody just a couple months ago.
All right. So someone has, they have their, not, okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Here it is. All right. Here we go. Great. Yeah. And this is, I actually have this, I had this.
All right. What I would recommend you do, Anthony, is the first link there.
Yeah, I'm on it right now. Actually, I prepared. I have this slide up as well. So
okay, yeah,
this is great minds think alike here. So let me just share. I have it up here, and I'll get that up here. So here it is on. Here it is. There you go. Here we go. Here's what the Windfall Elimination Program is. I am on the Social Security website right here, so that's where it is.
Yeah. So scroll down a little bit. Okay. So let me see if I can explain this without having to actually read it too carefully. It's not that well.
That's my goal in life too.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Okay, so you go through your life in America, you pay into Social Security. If you have 40 quarters, I think you're entitled to full benefits, whatever those are. The benefits, of course, are based on your highest years of employment, et cetera, et cetera. And what you get paid out is called the PIA, the primary insurance benefit. Okay. Now, the way that's calculated, all right, and this is the key to understanding this, is 90% of the first 1,174 of the payment, 32% of the next up to 7,000, and then 15% after that. So what I want you to notice is that it's 90% of the lowest tier, so to speak, right? Okay, so you break your payment into three parts, right? 90%, what you're getting from Social Security is 90% of the first 1,174. Yes?
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna figure this out. I'm gonna have it.
Let's go even more slowly. Okay. Now I hope I get this right.
And it is this AIME that's throwing me off. When I look at that, I'm like, what are you talking about? Right. So it's like, okay, so
average index monthly earnings. Don't worry about that, Anthony. Don't worry. Right. Let's cut to the chase here.
Okay. Yeah.
What we're concerned with is you get a payment from Social Security. Now, what's that payment based on? Okay. So it's 90% of the first. So you just calculate this amount based on how long you've been in the system, right?
Okay.
So of your earnings, right? How much are these earnings, et cetera? The average, right? The average index monthly earnings, right? That has something to do with your earnings. Yes.
Yes.
Now
okay.
Calculate. Yep. So yeah, now you calculate what your Social Security entitlement is. And that's 90. Now let's imagine that we take the monthly earnings and divide it into three categories. Okay. The first category is the first up to 1,174. All right. Then you go from 1,174 to 7,078. That's the second bracket. And the third is over 7,078. Now here's the key to understanding this. Okay. So let's pause.
Yes.
The amount that you get as a Social Security payment is 90% of the first bracket, 90% of the first bracket, 1,174, 32% after 1,174. So what I need you to see here, and for your listeners to understand, is that the actual Social Security benefit is based on the smallest amount of your earnings, right? 90% of the first part.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Yep.
Now, just to anticipate where we're going, what the Windfall Elimination Provision does is it reduces that first part, the 90%, right? It reduces the lowest tier.
Oh.
Got it? Now Now just go down here a little bit and we'll see how this works. Now there's a formula for how it's reduced. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Okay. Oh, we even have charts. Oh, this is great. I think this is where I should have. All right, this is gonna.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, further down, I think.
Further down. All right, I'm just looking at this chart. So I think this is okay. So we have.
Okay, so let me explain how it works. Okay, so you can see that your social point number one is your Social Security actual payment is mostly based, okay, on the lowest tier of your earnings, the first part up to the 1,001. So if they're going to make reductions there, that is necessarily going to reduce your Social Security entitlement. Agreed?
Agreed. Right. Correct.
In other words, if they instead of giving you 90% of that, they only give you 45% of that. That's $500 a month, it looks like, right?
All right. Yeah. And I guess this lowest amount is kind of the amount anyone who's going to get Social Security is going to get, right?
What's that?
Like the lowest amount that you're getting, this first tier, this first tier, the 90% of the first 11, the 1174 is basically kind of for everybody. If you're in a system, you're going to get that.
Yeah. I think that's what you're looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
So when they start reducing, if they're reducing the amount that everybody gets, right, then everybody's going to get the reduction. You see what I'm saying?
Okay, got it. Yeah.
So now here's
you wanted me to go a little bit more, or was this here?
Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Just keep on going down.
I think that's it.
Oh, that's it. Okay, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, but look, here's the bottom line. All right, the way this works is, of course, they have some arbitrary formula for how to do this. And the reduction is based on a formula based on the number of years of coverage that you actually have. So if you have 29 years of coverage, you know, it's going to be less, 28 years less, etc. But here's the key point here, okay? Once you hit 30 years, there's no reduction.
Okay.
Okay? So you hit 30 years, there's no reduction. And by the way, also, we've talked about Social Security totalization agreements before. If your entitlement is based on a Social Security totalization agreement, there's no reduction.
Okay. Oh.
Those are your carve-outs. But for everybody else with 29 years or less of insured earnings, if you are getting a pension that's not a covered pension, say an American abroad or a government work, you know, a fireman or something in the United States, okay, then you're going to get a reduction, and the amount of the reduction depends on how many years of covered work you have. Okay.
Okay, and that's what they're showing. And that's what they're showing here on the guarantee examples. They're going through somebody.
Yeah, that's what they're.
There it is, showing where they get cut out. Now, this is when you say 30 years, and I'm looking at these years of coverage. Is that what that stands for? YOC? Is that what that is? Years of. So when I see 30 years,
I think years of covered employment. Covered employment means.
So when I see these 20, 25, 30 years, the thing that comes to my mind is sort of the reality of the situation, the reality of how things have changed drastically from even, you know, things changed for my father. You know, he was part of the big change too. He was not lifetime employment. He had 3 different jobs over his career. So even his generation, you know, that 20, 30 year employment with one employer, kind of a thing in the past. And these are the 2 reasons why I'm bringing it up. Is number one, a U.S. expat probably has some years of service in the United States of America, but 30, probably not. Has some amount, but not that 30. So maybe more like 20, maybe less than 20. Also, when we're talking about public employees, and especially now, you know, many police officers, they're going in, I think, for 20 years, getting out. They don't really have enough to retire. They got to get a second job. But that second job, you know, whether they work for themselves or whether they get a second job, they probably won't get 30 years there either. You know, they're not going to get it. So they're not going to, hey, look, I got my 30 years. I don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, both expats. And I could see how both expats and expats and government employees can both be affected by this. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're both going to be affected by it. I mean, at the risk of overstepping, this is so complicated. At the risk of at the risk of going too far, let me try this. You know, I mean, I think one might reasonably ask, why in the world do they do this, right? Okay, and the reason they justify this comes from a 1983 change in the law. Okay, here's their justification for this. Okay, their justification is that if you look at how Social Security is calculated, you're getting 90% of the lowest amount of the lowest bracket of your covered earnings, right?
Right.
Now, if you assume that somebody in the United only worked in the United States and it's all been covered earnings, and they have a relatively low income, that's all well and good. But the problem is that in calculating this, it looks only at covered earnings. So if you compare that person who really did have a low income throughout their life in the United States, so let's say, an expat, right, who, works for 20 years in the United States and then spends the next 20 or 30 years, sipping champagne on the Riviera, this sort of stuff, right? And getting a pension for it from the French government or something. Yes, okay, that's their job. That or haven't been paid for that. You see, the problem is they actually had higher earnings overall. You see
Right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes, I see your point. Right. I see exactly your point
So
here.
it's so to base their Social Security entitlement on 90% of the only visible thing, right, the covered earnings. Now, here you have to understand that what is Social Security? It's supposed to be an income replacement thing. That what happens is the reason they call it a windfall is the champagne drinking expat gets a windfall because their income really wasn't that low. You see what I'm saying? It just looked low because, if you look only at their Social Security contributions. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the theory behind this. Whether you
Well,
agree with
what we're doing, what Social Security is doing is that, it's supposed your benefit is supposed to be based on how much you paid in, but we can see clearly that
well,
that's actually not true.
it's not
That's
true
not
at
true,
all.
and
That's
not true at all because you could pay in far more than someone else, but you just paid it in a shorter amount of time than someone who paid in very little over a longer time. Your benefit is not as much as that person, even though you paid in more.
Well, the point is simply this, right? That um, basically two people can pay in for 20 years. Okay. And if one of them has more years of, now let's say two people pay in for 20 years, the first person stops working after 20 years. Okay.
Yep.
Second person has 20 more years of work that's not covered, say one of these rich expats or something.
Yeah.
Okay. The rich expat is going to get their thing reduced. Okay. Their payment reduced. The other person will not, right? So I don't know. I don't know what I think about this. I see the logic behind it. If your view is the way you said it a minute ago, and a lot of people see it this way, you said, well, I paid into my Social Security, I should get my benefits along with everybody else. Well, maybe. I don't know that I disagree with that particularly, but I would point out that that's a view of Social Security that is kind of a forced savings plan,
Yeah.
right? You
Yep.
pay and you get out. If, on the other hand, you view it as a government program that's supposed to be an income replacement, a certain percentage of your earnings, then that's how you justify this windfall elimination provision stuff, right?
Wow. So I want to thank everyone. Yeah, and I just want to. Yeah, I see we have a lot of new viewers joining us today. We're talking about Social Security. Normally, we talk about tax, and that gets a little complicated. But Social Security has its. Hey, look, it's the same government administering this, so it's pretty crazy. But I think we're getting to the essential tension here that we have is that, well, what is Social Security supposed to be? Is it supposed to
That's
be
right.
old age assistance, or is it supposed to be a pension? Which one is it? And the answer is it tries to be both. It tries to be
Well,
both.
you know what? I think it doesn't try to be both.
No,
Actually, at least this is my thought on it. And I think that the 1983 Windfall Elimination Provision law, is designed to emphasize that it's an income replacement thing and not a pension, right? I mean, pensions are things you pay into and, you get a certain payout on them. Okay, Social Security is apparently something you pay into and, they'll decide what you get, based on a variety of factors.
right. Oh,
Um,
wow. Amazing. So they just
but,
make it up.
just a pause here, right? Again, who is this a problem for? Well, it's a problem for, if we want to look at, Americans abroad, if we want to start there, it's a problem for people who get an annual letter or whatever people get. I have no idea, saying, here's what you paid in, here's, what you can expect to get out. See, the problem with those letters is that they don't, is they're based on all covered work, right? In other words, that you don't have a pension or anything outside the United States. But then when they find out that you do, then what they do is they start the clawback, right? And this is very unfair from, I think, a procedural notice point of view. At the very least, if that's the law, people should know about it, right? But they don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, let's get. Yeah. Let me get back your presentation here. Yeah, this is amazing. So yeah, wow.
There's three issues here, and we probably got this about as complicated as we want it to be. There's also a government pension offset. I don't even want to get into that today. That's, with government employment and stuff. The second link there, and I'm not suggesting you go to it, but, if one were to click on that, there's actually a calculator that shows how much your pension is going to be reduced. I don't know. Maybe you want to put it up. Put up the link.
Let me try to get that. Okay, give me a second. I'll get that.
The middle one, calculating the reduction based on the web. I mean, let's see what it actually looks like, according to the government.
Hang on a second. Yeah. The second. All right. Opened up in the wrong window. Hang on a second. This is, it is. I'm just sort of thinking of somebody who worked at, I'm thinking domestically. So I'm thinking of somebody who worked for, say, the town, like, hey, you work for a municipality as a police officer. Okay, let's say that, hey, look, because of that, you don't pay into Social Security. Great. And you retire after 25 years. Now, as a retired police officer, you get a job, say, for a local university running security. You're actually paid pretty well. But the job is only for, say 8 years or so. So you're paying in this massive amount. But then when you look at what you get back, it's not really there, is it? Right. So I think that's what we're getting to. So how this can really
it's a problem. I mean, I think that the Social Security stuff, has got to figure out what it's actually trying to do. But let's have a look at this. This is interesting. So estimate your retirement disability benefit could decrease. Put in $2,000. Just put in.
So I get a $2,000 pension from my month.
All right.
Okay.
I don't know if you need that.
Oh wow, that's nice.
So yeah, that's what they're calculating the reduction to be. Put in $1,500. See what it says.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is. Why does it say 50? Why is it the same?
Well, that's why I wanted you to put in 15, because the amount.
What if I put in 4,000?
Reduction on the first tier up to $1,174. Put in $900. Put in $900.
Okay, so it doesn't. As soon as your pension is, wait a second.
$450.
Over what is it? What's the amount of pensions over before the drop off? 500. Okay. So with $1,100, what happens? Because it's 597 was the highest number we could have for the reduction, right?
Well, yeah, but now why is that, Anthony? It's because the reduction is based on the first tier. Remember, the first tier is you get 90%.
Oh, right. That's what we just said. That's right. Okay, so wait a second. No, this does seem a little stinky here. Because you're basically, your pension is, if your employer pension's $1,000 a month, that's not a lot. That's not a lot, and your benefit is getting reduced. So essentially, you're only getting, your benefit's getting reduced by. Whoa! Oh my! All right. So this does seem a little nasty here. I got to be honest.
Well, it is nasty. Okay, there's no question about it. But I mean, that shows you that this is not some theoretical issue, and this is an issue that, I mean, the more you're dependent on Social Security, the more this hurts you, right? And I mean, if I were an advocate for the people who don't like this, I think that's exactly the way I would put it. The more dependent you are on Social Security, the more this is likely to hurt you. And that seems very counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Wow, and just think, you paid all those taxes into Social Security, right? You
Oh,
did,
it's just
just think
incredible.
about that. Right, again, and just think about, your employer did too. It's not, when you look at your paycheck, you're just seeing your part. Your employer has a matching part. Trust me on that one. So all of this money your employer paid in, all the money you paid in, well, you have other money, so we're going to reduce you. Well, it does sound like, hey, look, I got to say, it does sound consistent. It does sound like our
Well,
government.
it's a penalty, right? It's a penalty. It's a Social Security receipt penalty on non-covered work, right? Meaning work that's not, subject to Social Security. And I mean, if you were to do a Google search on this, and anybody's listening should, Google H.R.82, and you're going to see all kinds of links to, public employee unions and things like that, who really find this incredibly objectionable. And put it in now.
Yeah, no, well, I actually have that. That was actually what I was reading here too. Where is it? Here it is. This is, I think, the one. There's an article I was reading about. Okay, so this is the one. Okay, that I was reading that basically said, okay, it's a bipartisan effort to advance House legislation that would repeal a pair of controversial tax rules that negatively impact some federal workers' retirement income. Even took another step forward last week. And so really the focus is on, federal employees. It's not going to be expats. There's really not a constituency.
Of course.
Yeah, believe it or not. And here it is. This is what the Windfall Elimination Provision reduces the Social Security benefits of retired employees who spent a portion of their careers in the private sector, in addition to federal, state, or local government position where Social Security is not intended as an element of the retirement income. So this is the civil service retirement program. And the government pension offset.
I think what's significant here, Anthony, is the very last line that says the windfall reduced Social Security benefits of around 2 million former civil servants. I mean, this is a big issue. And again, I'm gonna say it again since I just thought of this doing this podcast. But I mean, if I were arguing, that this is bad stuff, I would make the point over and over that it hurts the people the most who need the Social Security the most.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That seems to me to be fairly clear.
Wow. And it's a perverted system. You're punished for having your own you're having your own for taking care of yourself or trying your best to take care of yourself. The system punishes you, which is, it's the government. So.
Honestly, Anthony, my advice to anybody in this world would be to not be dependent on any of this stuff. Okay.
Yeah. And it's like, all right, I'm a little confused here myself too. That would repeal a pair of controversial tax rules. These aren't tax rules.
No, they're not. That's how people see them.
No, come on. I mean, well, geez.
Well,
geez, taxes are so complicated. We could just call anything that's complicated tax rules.
Well, but America is about taxation. Everything is about
our true constitution. Absolutely.
Look, to be clear, H.R. 82, which was passed in Congress on November the 12th, specifically repeals the Windfall Elimination Provision and this government pension offset thing that we're not going to talk about today. It's very short legislation, and it does that. And it's now, gone to the Senate.
All right. So, hey, for those, we got a lot of people joining. Thank you so much for joining live. So far, we talked about what the Windfall Elimination Provision is. We talked about who it's going to impact. We talked about the unfairness on how this works as your Social Security is decreased based on other pensions you have. Now, the bill was passed in the House, but mostly on the back of representing public employees, not for the expats who also are impacted by the same dynamic of not working 30 years for 30 years of contributions to Social Security. However, many of these people actually contribute far more into Social Security, but yet get far less. So that's where we are right now. All right. So
is this reasonable?
Yeah.
Again, I never knew much about this till, I started, I know Helen Berghoff, who ran American Expat Finance, and she was heavily into this for a while and wrote some great stuff. So most of, my sort of perspective on this has been shaped by her stuff, which is very good. But it is clear that there's two perspectives on this, right? There's the one that you introduced early on, that it's some kind of a forced save, that I paid into it, so I should get, the same as everybody else who paid into it type of thing, which is very reasonable. And then there's the sort of, perspective too, that the windfall elimination provision is based on that. Well, not really. The purpose of this is an income replacement. Okay. And sure, you paid into it, but that's not the test of what you should be getting out. The test for what you should be getting out is, how does it relate to the income replacement issue? Um, you know, I kind of get this. I'm not sure what I think about this. It's easy to not know what you think about if it doesn't affect you. I mean, this has no, effect on me. I mean, I don't need.
No,
I
we're
don't.
getting some comments of people it is affecting. So please,
Oh no, for sure. I can understand. I mean, the problem for sure, right, which is not theoretical, is you spend 20 years getting letters from Social Security saying here are your benefits, and then all of a sudden, when you get your benefits, they're reduced by $500 a month. And what kind of bullshit is that? That's
that
the
is something else, right?
That's a
something
clear
else.
problem, right?
Right. There's an expectation interest here. People are expecting a certain amount, and they've been expecting a certain amount for years. Then to find out, well, sorry, everything we told you for these years, we were lying because there's something we didn't tell you about.
It's an expectation interest based on direct representations by the government. Okay, it's not an expectation interest by watching IRSMedic. Okay, it's an expectation interest based on correspondence from the government of the United States, right?
Yes.
Okay? Next.
Oh God, this government is really something here, huh? All right.
Oh, carve-outs. It would not be America if we didn't have carve-outs.
Right.
The opening scene of The Godfather. I believe in America. There's got to be a carve-out for me somewhere.
Everything's a carve-out. That's the American mind.
But here's a couple carve-outs.
Yeah.
Okay, that are interesting. Carve-outs, if you got 30 years of covered work, I guess they figure you've contributed enough. So, you're not subject to this. What I find interesting is that, we've talked about the Social Security totalization agreements where people can get U.S. Social Security base who don't, meet the test themselves based on work elsewhere. These people are somehow carved out from this as well. I don't have any thoughts on that at the moment. I just noted I haven't thought about it at all.
Wait a second. Wait. Let me back up to what you just said.
I'm not even sure if I know how.
Hold on a second, because we say, wait a second. So if somebody is working overseas, okay, and they have a totalization agreement, that means they don't have to pay into Social Security at all.
No, it doesn't mean that. They get Social Security based on totaling, hence the word totalization, years of contribution to U.S. Social Security, and let's say years of contribution to Canada Pension Plan.
Okay.
They total those amounts to be able to qualify, where they live. Now, again, all of this is so complex that it's way beyond the pay grade of the average person. And I think probably anybody who doesn't do this full time, right? But the only point
person as well, I think it affects them too.
The only point I'm making is that there's a carve out. The people who get their Social Security based on totalization agreements are not subject to the windfall elimination provision. Just a comment.
Oh, okay.
The more complexity, the better.
Wait a second. So depending on the country you live in.
Well, of course, because not all countries have totalization agreements. Look, this is America.
This is America. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, this is why John and I say the true Constitution of the United States of America is its tax code, because, apparently, there's a whole bunch of things we're supposed to have. We're supposed to have equal protection under the law. But this country intentionally discriminates in so many ways based on your heritage. And really, in the tax system, you'll find so many ways where you're discriminated based on your citizenship and where you're living. Multiple times, all the time. It's a big thing of the government to make sure they discriminate you based on where you live.
Anthony, why this happens, though? I think it's the result of the way laws are made. Like, you look at this whole Social Security thing, right? And then in '83, they come up with this windfall elimination provision. Notice they don't come up with an overhaul to Social Security, right? It's an add-on. It's an add-on, Like
Yeah.
the tax code, subpart F is an add-on, add-ons, right? Without any thought about what it means, to the total. But anyway, let's continue on here.
All right. I'm working on a big rant in my head for the finale, by the way.
Yeah, we're not. This is a
Yeah,
link
we're
to
not
a
there yet, but
fantastic
I want to
analysis.
tease everyone. I'm like, I got some ideas going here. So, okay.
All right, next.
This one you don't want to do?
Let's just pass that. It's a great analysis, but we don't have time for it. Now, let's talk about what's going on. And so HR 82 actually passed the House on November the 12th, 2024, right? That's reason. You don't need to go there, but there's a link to the text of the legislation. It's very short. There's 2 paragraphs to it. One eliminates the windfall elimination provision. The other eliminates the government pension offset. As you might expect, there's a lot of commentary from the various groups, ACAs, some of the best commentary. No need to link on it. But they make an interesting point here, a couple interesting points. I mean, I think their stuff is always well written. Is that first of all, this version of it does cover expats. Okay, previous attempts to get this changed have not, so that's encouraging.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, right. Wow.
Well, that is significant, and that may very well be the result of some of their lobbying work. Maybe. Okay, let's assume it is, and give them a hat tip or a shout out. And of course, Arrow, based in Paris, has been on this for a lot of years. Doris Spear, who's the president of Arrow, has written some really great stuff on this. But anyway, so this is where we are now. But to get this passed, right? Next slide. It's now in the Senate, and there's a lot of, really interesting advocacy. There's Facebook groups that have, popped up everywhere. And people are pushing hard, to contact their representatives to get this through. And, I think it might be worth if you can click on that link. I don't know if we'll be able to read
The
the
one at the bottom there.
Yeah, it's kind of small, but that's a post where they really talk. Where basically they're being very frank about it. It might be too costly for the government to pass.
Oh, wow.
I mean, look at it this way: there's only 2 weeks left, and if they can't get it done by December 31st, it's not going to get done. So this could very easily die, right?
Get that. I got that screen up here, right here. Okay, here it is. The bipartisan policy. Well, that sounds.
No, that's something else. But that's a great article. That's the best article I've ever.
Wait, just whenever you hear the word bipartisan, hold on to your wallet. That's a quote from my dad. So it's been going on for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, that's not what we want. Let's just go back to the presentation.
All right, we'll go back to the presentation. All right.
We're out of time here. I'd be interested to see if there are any comments next.
Right.
I've already made the point that I think that there can be reasonable disagreement on the reasonableness of the windfall elimination provision, but there can be no agreement on the unfairness of not telling people about this. Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, and that's where you get into this whole psyop that is our government, with the confusion and these complicated rules that you're not being honest with people. You're being adversarial to them. Really, you're being adversarial.
I think people have a right to understand the laws that apply to them, and that is the very antithesis of the
United States, right?
Anyway,
we have some laws we can't understand. It's just accepted that, hey, it's another law. Who knows what it means?
Well, it makes people, passive recipients of this stuff rather than participants, and it's hard for them to plan their lives. But anyway, next.
Other than that, right?
There's a link to, for if anybody's interested in this, a really quite brilliant Helen Berggraf, that I put on my own site. She gave me permission to post it there. But, if you want to get some really good background on this, that's a good place. Next.
Okay. I will get that.
And then finally, she gives us yet another cartoon that I think sums it up. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Helen, she hopes you get the picture. Well, there's a good picture. This is a problem. It's a problem for, a certain group of people. And, again, I think that this is something that, people need to understand, before they leave the United States. I mean, it's a clear, well, I don't know. Is it a cost? Maybe they're getting Social Security where they live. Maybe not. I don't know. But it does seem to, it clearly alters the Social Security relationship between the U.S. government and its citizens. There's no doubt about that. And for that reason, I think that this stuff has to come with warning, warning, warning. Here are reasons why we might reduce your Social Security benefits, right? And they don't do that. They just sort of motor on. This is what you're going to get, and then, oops, sorry, we weren't exactly forthcoming with all the information. Next.
Well, not exactly forthcoming. Now, I think what as I'm going through this, it's like really what this is underlying is like the whole problem with Social Security, the entire problem with it. As you read on the history of Social Security when it was enacted, I think 1937, that was actually the first employee withholding. The first employee withholding was not for income taxes, but it was for Social Security, which is and they also said, oh well, we're going to call it a tax, and it's actually not an entitlement because you're entitled to nothing. If the government decides you're entitled to nothing right now, to say, hey, how many years of Social Security you pay in? Oh, I paid in the max over 30 years. Oh, really? Okay, well, I could decide that you get nothing. That's actually what they're allowed to do. There's no promise from anything. So I think really what we have here is an incredibly sick Social Security system that, when you think about it, it is a Ponzi scheme. The first people who got it never paid a dime into it. So who's paying for that?
Anthony,
And what's that?
On that point that you're making, on renunciation, when you file the form 8854, that is the reason that you give, namely that there's no entitlement, contractual entitlement to Social Security, is precisely why Social Security benefits are not considered to be assets on expatriation. That's precisely the reason. Okay.
Well, I can't believe they're consistent. That's amazing. Wow, they're actually logically consistent on that. Well, that's good for them. Good for them.
Right.
And I think as you go through this, and this is what I would say, and I might save my rant for the right comments. Are we at the end?
I don't know. Let's see if we're apparently.
Hey, John Richardson.
Oh, there's my advice to you there. Advice, everybody.
There you go.
It's a huge mistake to rely on representations made by Social Security. Anthony, why don't you read that out? Maybe they'll absorb it if you read it too.
All right, I will. All right, advice. It is a huge mistake to rely on representations made by Social Security, or I would also say, and I'd probably extend that to the government at large. The government at large really doesn't have any contractual anything.
Anything is confused, okay?
Yeah.
People will
get confused. So there we are. All right, so let's get. You ready to get some comments here?
Yeah, let's see what people think of this.
Let's see what people have to say about this. And I think, all right, so here we go. Let me get this. Let's get our shining faces front and center here. All right, there we go. All right, here we go. Yep, and it is, here it is. We're charged more if we make more. That's right, absolutely. Now, what's this comment, Jack Dack? Renounce got tax taken out before it is distributed.
Right. Actually, let's talk about that a little bit, okay?
Okay.
So, if you're considering renunciation, well, here, let me give you a real recent story, okay? So somebody called me up. I'll give you two stories. Somebody called me up, and it's an American citizen living in Mexico and wanted to talk about renunciation. And I said, so tell me about your income sources. And he said, well, I live off Social Security. And I said, okay. So do you realize that if you renounce U.S. citizenship and you become a non-resident alien, you're going to be taxed on the Social Security under the FDAP regime? In other words, the 30%, or rather, in this case, 26.5%. Now, this is all subject to various treaties, but I looked at least I think I'm right in my memory of this. I think during the call, I pulled up the U.S.-Mexico tax treaty, which I think, I may be mistaken this while, but I think what it said was the U.S. has sole taxing rights to Social Security. So I asked him a very simple question. I said, would it affect your standard of living if the U.S. government reduced your Social Security payments by 25%? And he said, yes. And then I said, do you think it's a good idea for you to renounce? And he said, I could never afford it. End of call. Okay. A priceless consultation. I don't think that's a question for it, but end of call, right? I mean, if he had gone ahead with that, he would have, he didn't have a lot anyway, but he certainly would have impoverished himself, right?
Yeah, so, no, and I love how you just solved a big question that people always have very quickly. Am I still entitled to Social Security after I renounce my U.S. citizenship? Yes, but you really may be taxed at a much, much higher rate. It really is going to depend on the country you're living on, and if it has a treaty that will save you.
Yeah, well, that's right. And, I mean, these treaties vary, right? There can be a treaty that would give the sole taxing rights to your country of residence, but mostly in the world of Social Security, mostly Social Security type payments, the country that pays them retains the taxing rights. And, what you got to understand here, let me give you one more example. This was really interesting. This is somebody who, somehow or other found her way to me. But her problem was she was a green card holder. She was living in Australia, where the U.S. retains taxing rights to Social Security. As a green card holder, she's a U.S. tax resident. They weren't, as US, they're not going to withhold taxes, right? On the Social Security if you're a U.S. citizen or resident. But what happened was that she inadvertently managed to give up her green card. Like she went into the United, I don't know, some story, they asked her to sign an I-407. And then all of a sudden, I mean, she's living almost exclusively off Social Security. And, then all of a sudden, she loses 25% of that. I mean, you really got to be careful with this stuff. Okay. I mean, it is worth, here's a bit of a plug. It is worth talking to somebody with some experience in this problem. Okay. I mean, this is because, again, what we see here, the general theme of this whole discussion, even now, is that this stuff tends to hurt the people who need it most.
Yes.
Right?
That's our government. That's our government. Really. Here's a great comment here, and from YouTube user. I love your username, YouTube user. Benefits in Social Security should be based on what you paid into your pension, part of your salary package from JAR, which must be payable as well. And they're two separate things. And you're right on that. Your Social Security based on what you should pay. But this is what I think what we have here. Essentially, we got to look at, as you go through this, what is Social Security really designed to do? What is it really designed to do? And the answer is Social Security is really designed to make you dependent on the government's whims. So the whole purpose is to take people who are looking to receive Social Security and say, hey, we're going to put our votes to people who are going to make sure that we get the most, and really creating an intergenerational war. That's really what it is. And I'm not claiming that people are, hey, look, I've been paying all my whole life. What's going on? Hey, we're all getting ripped off. We're all getting ripped off. The government's the one who's making on this. So what I would say is that this windfall elimination provision, whatever it is, it's kind of nonsense. Whatever it is we're just rearranging the deck chairs, because the problem that we have is Social Security is a complete and utter disaster. And how do I know? How do I know for sure that the government wants Social Security just a way to make you dependent on the government and up to the government's whims? And what's the government going to do? Okay, yeah, I'll vote for whoever's going to maximize this. How do we know this? Well, because the answer how we know this is in the 90s. There was a move to privatize Social Security globally. And in the United States, there was proposals. I remember these coming around. Hey, we're going to privatize Social Security. And they were shot down. They were shot down to say, oh, this is a bad idea because blah, 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 blah. Whatever their cases, right? They're going, oh, well, you'll have your benefit. Well, of course, the government cuts your benefits whenever they want. But one country that did, and there were more than one, but one country that did privatize the Social Security, we happen to know very well. Australia, John and I are very familiar with the superannuations, and a lot of our viewers are very familiar with the Australian superannuation system. And I have clients with Australian superannuations, clients who have worked just normal jobs. I worked a normal job, and now they're millionaires. They are, I know it, because they were able to privatize their own pension. And the purpose of the Australian superannuation law was to say, hey, look, man, we're going to go broke. We got all these boomers who are going to be coming into the system. And there's no way that we'll be able to pay them their benefit based on the traditional method. We're going to need them to fund their own retirements. Now, the problem with that, of course, is now you're creating independent people. You're creating independent people who don't need the government. And so if somebody has, hey, look, if it's just a regular dude who worked a regular job as a millionaire after 20, 25 years, that's someone who's got ideas of his own. He's like, I'm not going to need this little thing from the government. I'm not going to need it. They'd have no leverage over me. So that right there is the proof why that the U.S. government wants you to be completely dependent on them for everything, so that you will worship them and vote for the same clowns that do the same thing and put us in this terrible situation. Look, I think in 5 years, every single baby boomer will be at 65 or older. Every single baby boomer will be eligible for Social Security. Every single one of them will be, and this is all by design. The government totally had an ability. They saw the problem. The government saw the problem in the 90s, and they specifically did not want to solve it because it creates a very, very compliant population that will do what they tell you to do. Oh, here we go, 1996, right? Here's the government. Let's say the point 1996, the government took back matching dollars from 401k, and now penalizing again. Oh, I'm actually not aware of that. So, John, do you know about that?
No, not really. But listen, I think let's not lose sight of the key message here. Okay, the message is there's no expectation that what you get out of Social Security is directly related to what you put into it. Okay, that's I think the key message that people need to understand. And people who don't go through a lifetime of covered work, especially, need to be very much aware of this as a problem. Okay. And by the way, we haven't gotten into this today, but it extends down into survivors benefits and all kinds of stuff. So this is a big issue.
All right. This comment here, Brian's reminding me of my dad. Worked for this state, as he did, and I collected a very good pension. Well, my dad got an early retirement from the state in 1991. He's been collecting his pension longer than he has been working for the state of Connecticut, and also get a nice Social Security check every month. I did a lot of research before I took the job. Is everybody stupid? Well, Brian. Maybe
no, it's the people trust the government. That's the problem.
That's the problem, Brian. Yeah, I can say that. I don't know if people are stupid or as much as they're misled. Yeah, right. I mean, come on, Brian. You're getting something. But John's point, the procedural due process problem. You're getting something near the mail that says here's your benefit. Oh, no, we're not. So, did someone do enough research to say don't trust anything the government says? I mean, I don't know if you need to do any more research. I don't think you do, but most people, will trust the government on that. By the way, my dad has 3 pensions and Social Security. By the way, he did do his homework on that. So let's see here. Here we go. D. Hey, D. Thanks for joining us today. This year, the wealthiest people increased their wealth by $546 billion. Is wealth they built using this infrastructure built with our tax dollars? Think about that. Well, I would just say that D, there's so much going on with that with your comment, and I would just say that word wealthiest, that's the thing that we just want to define, because for a lot of people, you're going to group in. Let me tell you something. Somebody who has $10 million in assets, they're not wealthy. The government can destroy them. The government can destroy them. The government can destroy somebody with $50 million. You need to get way up there. You need to get way up there, and you need to be paying people off. Then you're protected. So let's just be true about that, because you're right. As long as we're defining wealthy correctly, but they're increasing their wealth on our backs using the system of the government. That's actually the purpose. Actually, the purpose of the U.S. Constitution. If you actually look, if you adopt the Abraham Lincoln, George Washington motif of the American Empire, was actually to build an American empire. And the whole point of the government was to make some people rich and some people poor. So D, it's still going on. That's what I would say.
So D, what you're saying are the clouds before the storm. You probably weren't around when President Kennedy, in his inaugural address in 1961, but one of the points that he made was, and it's a bit of a paraphrase, but he said, a country that cannot take care of its poorest and most vulnerable citizens will never be able to protect its richest. And, if you look at history, we go back to the 20s and this sort of stuff. I mean, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but, but the general theme is clear that this is not going to go on indefinitely. Okay. There's going to be some kind of readjustment on this, but whether it's true or not, that they're building their wealth through infrastructure built with, whether that's true or not. I mean, Trump used to make the point, he's saying, Amazon's using the U.S. Postal Service as a delivery boy, right? I remember he said that once, right? Whether it's true or not, the point is that that's the perception. And I think there's likely to be a very significant readjustment. But that said.
Right. And hey, I got this is a great count to what I said before. Why didn't we privatize Social Security in 1990s? I remember this argument. Thank you very much, PB Regan, for this one. We can't trust Wall Street. That's a true statement. The rich buy our representatives. So now what? Yeah, exactly. I would say I don't trust Wall Street at all either. But why do I need? But why does my pension need to be invested in Wall Street? Doesn't need to be.
I don't think that's the point. I don't think that's the point that this person is making. I think the person is making that I may be wrong. Okay, that basically that you can't let rich or wealthy people monopolize the political process. I mean, leaving aside your position on this, this is this is the argument, right, for keeping big money out of politics, right? The people who oppose things like Citizens United, or if you're a disciple of, say, Senator Sanders, etc. I mean, would anybody disagree if I said that it's very difficult to play a role in the political process in America if you don't have wealth?
Right, and I think that's all. That's really the thing. We have a government that doesn't reflect the will of the people because the people don't even know what the will of government is, or we know what the will of government is if we think about it, but we don't know what the laws are that they pass. We don't understand them. So it can't. If your constituency can't understand what you're doing, then you can't be representing them. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. So. And I mean, and I think it's the typical divide, though. Typical divide is that, well, this narrative that, well, hey, I'm for free capitalism. Well, I'm not for this. Like, no, it's all phony divides, and it's nonsense. Counterpoint from the Professor Fate: you shouldn't be allowed multiple pensions if any one of them was a result of civil service, and you shouldn't be collecting Social Security if you don't need it. Well,
I think that is a reasonable point. I'm not convinced that the windfall elimination provision, in terms of what it's intended to do, is wrong at all. I'm not sure on that. I mean, I don't have to think about it, I guess, because it doesn't impact me. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's wrong. But the procedural thing is clearly wrong. And what this involves is a rethink of what Social Security actually is. And one of the things that's interesting about the United States is that for those who don't have clawbacks, which is the vast, overwhelming majority of Americans do not have these kinds of clawbacks. I mean, you would have to understand the Social Security systems of other countries to fully appreciate how incredibly lucrative the U.S. Social Security system is. I mean, it's unbelievable. I can't think of anything that's comparable to it. In fact, it's extremely lavish, and and at the same time, people in America somehow object to socialism. I mean, hey, but anyway, let's continue.
Good point. Well, I think that's all we have for comments today. But wow, great comments. Thank you all so much for your comments. Very, very insightful. And I think this is an area what Social Security is. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this, but other than what I said before, just a complete reform of Social Security is really required because it's just.
Absolutely. I mean, what is this? What is this intended to do? I mean, is it a forced savings program, in which case it's a pension, or is it income replacement, or is it to make sure people?
Yeah, is it a safety net or a pension? Which one is it? Well,
or is it intended to be? Maybe it should be viewed. I'm sure that the Bernie Sanders of the world might argue for a guaranteed annual income. Maybe it's a guaranteed annual income. I don't know. But it seems to me that that this whole issue needs to be reconsidered.
I think there's our conclusion right now. We need to reconsider all of Social Security because I think one of the things, if you look at this, how crazy it is, you could see the unfairness and the great arguments on both sides. Ultimately, it's unfair to everybody. Ultimately, Social Security is unfair to everybody. Well, actually, no. You said in certain cases it actually can be lucrative, but that's unfair.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, look, this has been an interesting discussion. I never think about this stuff.
Well, I would say that, John, I want to thank you for your presentation and really your slides, because
But,
now
I will say it's clear that it's time for a reset of what Social Security is. That is for sure. Right?
One thing is, right, if your benefit your benefit they're claiming they're going to give you isn't the benefit you receive, it needs a reform. I think that we can conclude. So, all right, John. Yeah, again, I want to just thank you so much, because now I actually understand Social Security a lot better, and I understand the windfall elimination, and I understand the arguments on both sides, and I understand
Anthony,
more evidence that our government does not represent the will of the people.
Blind leading the blind. Okay, the most this can be would be a springboard for doing your own research on this. But listen, if you're an American abroad out there, okay, and if this is a big issue for you, you probably should be lobbying these people in the Senate, to get their act together. And then, of course, if they ignore this, that should be a strong message to Americans abroad as well.
Well, right? And then maybe we should just sort of segue out here, because this is really a thing we've been talking about. There's a lot of Trump is promising a lot of tax reform and ending double taxation overseas, but we've commented to say, hey, look, if it doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. If it doesn't happen now, everything's right, and John and I are on the task force to eliminate double taxation overseas, and so we have the inside scoop about how it actually may happen. So if it doesn't happen now, we got big problems. And then I would just say you might want to be looking in, and you might be wanting to look at renouncing your citizenship, unfortunately, for overseas.
I don't know, to what extent, this Trump pledge, claim, suggestion, idea, to eliminate taxation on Social Security. I don't know, if this has anything to do with it or not.
Yeah, we don't know.
Anyway, it's a total mess.
If you are interested in renouncing your citizenship,
don't rely on it. Okay. You're going to rely on it to your detriment. That part I can guarantee. Okay.
That's right. Yep. If you are considering renouncing your citizenship, you can reach out to John, and he understands these treaty issues, and they really, really matter. And if you happen to have a international tax issue going on and you're looking for a tax expert to solve it, you can book a time to speak with us at IRSMedic.com/offshore. So with that, I don't know if we have our next topic planned for next week, but we'll be back here hopefully with Keith.
I'm out of town next week. I can't do next week in any case.
Sorry. Well, I'm going to be
here's some things.
Are you saying this might be our last John Richardson that we have on the channel for 2024?
Well, not necessarily. We can do something earlier, but there's some incredible things that have happened that we really ought to do podcasts on. Okay.
Well, maybe we want to do a 2024 year in review, because there's so much.
You could do that. If you want to do it. Let's do it on. I could do Tuesday morning, the 17th. I can't do anything after.
All right, let's do that. Okay, so we'll do that. I think we're going to do the best
2024 stuff that's happened in the last week or so that. Including a decision having to do with the net investment income tax. That's just huge. And of course, there's the Roger Ver thing, which really incorporates all these ideas.
Well, we also have the Warden's decision.
In fact, I got so many partial
This is the biggest year in tax I could think of, right? 2024 has been.
It's not about tax. Remember, as goes taxation, so goes civilization. This is the biggest year of sort of American civilization ever. People just don't know it yet.
All right, John Richardson, thanks so much. I'm Anthony Parent for IRSMedic. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications so you know when we go live. We like to get to all comments, so thanks everyone so much for joining us.